When traditional medicine, so the conventional medical system that most of us have relied on for our entire lives to get us well when we need it, when it falls short, how do we keep hope alive for ourselves, for our recovery? And how do we find the answers that we need to get well? In this video, we are diving deep into a personal story that explores these questions. Hi, everyone. I'm Raelan, and this channel is dedicated to those of you seeking recovery from chronic illnesses such as ME/CFS and long COVID. Each week, I share stories and strategies that offer hope and a path forward. Today, I'm excited to have Jeff Moffatt with me. He's over in Bournemouth in the UK. Jeff's journey with ME/CFS began about 10 years ago, taking him from an active, marathon running, energetic life to one filled with debilitating fatigue and endless doctor's visits and questions. It took him 7 years of struggle and self-advocacy and exploration to start to find his own path to recovery. So I'm so inspired by Jeff's story. He is an amazing person. You're going to love him. And I am excited to learn from his experience right along with all of you here. So please join me in welcoming Jeff. Jeff, amazing to get to talk to you today. Thank you for doing this.
No, it's my pleasure. And I, as we'll talk in a bit, the opportunity to share, I think that's how we all start on this journey, feeling very lonely. And I think when there's people around who appreciate what you're going through or what you're trying to, get by, I think it makes a massive difference.
Yeah. So is that what made you want to do this interview today? Because I know
absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, you and I know there's a little bit more of a backstory to how I connected with you, but yeah, we'll perhaps come into that. But from where I am today, I really do want to do what you did for me for at least one other person.
Yeah. Now, I know these interviews mean the world to people, and they're not the easiest thing, to do. So definitely appreciate it. So yeah, tell us about your journey. How did this start for you?
It's quite sad to think now back, but it's over 10 years, just over 10 years. And literally prior to that, I was running marathons and I was feeling fit. I just turned 50. I was doing DIY at home. I was busy with my work. I was traveling. I was probably doing too much, but at the time I felt okay for it. And then after a marathon late in October, in fact, just before we ran, I wasn't feeling like it on that day. And I'd often run with feeling a little bit of a cold or something coming on, but I could run it off. That day didn't get better. I've never felt any better since. Peaks and troughs, but never back to that pre-run. I probably should have not continued, but I was with my son. We were running for charity, and he kept encouraging me to go, and probably feels bad about that now, but he shouldn't, because I should know my own body better. Yeah, I didn't listen to my body at that time, and I've paid the price sort of ever since.
I talk a lot in interviews about, people hear me say, I wish I could go through all my past interviews and splice together all the times people have said certain things to me, because there's just certain things I've heard over and over. And one of them is I was running marathons. I can't even count how many people I've interviewed. And that is such a massive thing. That is something a very small percentage of the population does. And I think, speaks to some of the hard driving personality traits that people have who come into these conditions, not implying fault or anything like that, but just looking at the bigger picture. Has that been your understanding at all of your journey, now that you can look back on all these years, things about your personality?
Yeah, that so many of those of us who suffer with this are what they would class as achiever types, where we push, we don't give in, and to our detriment. Ultimately, not everybody falls into this trap, but so many do, and that's the sort of message you want to get across. That's the sort of you want to warn people against it, but it's very difficult to. You don't want to preach either. That comes across as wrong as well. But so. I was a good 7 years into that journey, after a bit struggling, going from medical professional to medical professional, through the National Health Service, through private routes, spending lots of money, lots of time. It's positive, it could be this, it could be that, and never really getting to an answer. And I was sort of getting to a point where I thought, am I ever going to find any answer to this? Can I ever get to a point where I understand what's going on? And then my wife, she's been brilliant throughout, and she was researching time. And she came across this book by a lady called Raelan Agle, Finding Freedom, Escaping from the Prison of Chronic Fatigue. And she purchased it, said, "Oh, you might want to read this." And I started reading your book, and within the first chapter, there were statements about how you were feeling and how it sort of life was for you at that time. And there were so many synergies that I was just blown away by it. And for the first time, you were the first person who actually diagnosed what I was suffering with through your own experience. And I thought, why is there's so little known about this? And then ever since, I've been researching. I made contact with the Optimal Health Clinic, which is founders Alex Howard in the UK. You may have even had a discussion with Alex at some point, I seem to remember. And I went on a 90-day reset program, primarily to calm my mind, which is the first sort of stage, as we know, in the recovery process. And then I've researched since. I've been reading on nutrition and various other books. And all these things have built for me what I call my Venn diagram of knowledge. So there's lots of information out there. Some of it's bogus. There are charlatans and there are, snake oil sellers who promise a cure, tomorrow. But actually, it doesn't work like that. So this Venn diagram is an overlapping a number of sources, and it's the center that I focus on, where I get consistency and guidance, and that's what I work on now. But I'm probably I would say in a much better place. One, because I understand what I'm dealing with, but two, I understand some of the tools to manage it. And I'm not fully recovered. I'm probably some way off that, but I am, I would say, in a far better place because I can manage, and I know the cycle, my own cycle. So I know what triggers, and I know how to maybe pull back from the precipice of a trigger. But yeah, here we are nearly 10 years on, and I'm still working on it.
How is it in the UK now with medical professionals or just society in general? What is the understanding of ME/CFS? Is there, support available for it? What's the approach?
When I first started on this journey, they wouldn't have even been able to tell me what it was, I guess. And it was only when, through my own persistence and information like in your book and other sources, that I could then tell them what I thought it was. And right, okay, this could be. And they had this strange distinction. They would say, if your symptoms were predominantly pain, then it's fibromyalgia. We go and see a pain therapist to manage the pain. If your symptoms are more involved than that, less associated with pain, and mine were a collection of all sorts of things, including lots of pain. They then say, oh yeah, well maybe then it's chronic fatigue, because then we've tested for all the other potentials. There's no serious illness, therefore by a process of elimination, it must therefore be, which seems very weak. I'm an engineer by trade, and I cause and effect. I expect to see more accurate diagnosis for things, but it's not there. So in the UK, I would say growing, but our average general practitioner or MDs, the local doctors, very little knowledge. In fact, very little knowledge about nutrition in most cases.
Yeah, it's interesting, the diagnostic criteria. I remember even when I first got this, and some of the guides you would look at, chronic pain, you had to have chronic pain to get a CFS diagnosis. And chronic pain wasn't really a part of my journey. I had all the other classic symptoms like the post-exertional malaise and the brain fog and the debilitating fatigue and the refreshing sleep and all of that. But I'm like, what? So I don't check that one box. Or it would be things like you had to have it for a minimum of 6 months. And so at 5 months, you don't have it. You're just waiting around. It's just, I think we get bogged down in the definitions and all these different diagnoses. Is it ME? Is it CFS? Is it long COVID? Is there a difference between these things? Is it fibromyalgia? And so forth. I mean, it's important to look at these things, but yeah, really putting so much emphasis on them. I don't think any of us gets any of us really anywhere.
No, it's a long process, isn't it? Before most people I've spoken to, before they even get to an understanding themselves or a diagnosis, and then they can start working on it. But again, even then, the treatment sort of knowledge is limited. It's very much self-help or connecting with people who understand and have been through that journey like myself.
Yeah, there are teeny tiny pockets of medical professionals. I'm finding doctors that are in the know and are but probably 0.001% of what exists in the conventional medical system. I mean, it's a start, but for most people, they seem to be finding their answers on, not saying, ignore medical advice. You definitely still need to go to medical professionals, but also be open-minded to, what health coaches have to offer, what do recovery stories have to offer. in terms of information and insight, because that's
Right.
people I talk to, that's where they're finding their answers.
Yeah, that's where they're getting their results in most cases.
So for you, I mean, you've been on a long journey with this. It sounds like you've had a lot of insights along the way. What are the big components or the big pieces of this puzzle for you that are helping you and the most important for you, with your own journey with this?
I think, that you often with this condition, people will say, I know this is something that the Optimal Health Clinic quote, where you go through a process of hoping that you're going to find a solution. And then you start connecting with people who are experiencing the same thing. And you start then, particularly people who've recovered, and you go, well, I believe I could recover. And then you start sort of applying some of the practices that these people would advise, the good guidance, and then you start seeing a little bit of improvement. So then you get to the stage of knowing you're going to recover at some point. But for me, most important, and the key thing was I understood, therefore I could manage. I can't fight an enemy who I don't recognize, I don't understand. If I don't understand how it manifests and what the biomechanics are. And a really good book that Alex wrote was Decode Your Fatigue, which really helped me understand. And as an engineer, obviously that played to my interest. But then I can understand how all of the condition and the symptoms evolve. We start out with one thing, and then over time there's layers of this issue, because you progress through whatever the trigger was, whether that was a virus or whether it was a mental trauma. Something set you into that fight or flight, stress response sort of condition. And over time, like you say, chronic, more than 6 months, typically that's how they measure it. But for a prolonged time, and then you start getting an impact. Your nervous system is impacting your HPA axis. So your whole metabolism is thrown out of sync. Your energy levels are cycling at the wrong times. Your sleep patterns, as you mentioned before, get all out of kilter. You're not getting a full 8 hours to rest and restore. And your batteries aren't recharging your mitochondria. So the whole thing sort of progresses. And throughout all of that, you lose sight, or you almost lose touch of the symptoms that have surfaced and then dropped away, and others have surfaced and dropped away. And you try and explain that to a medical professional, how are you feeling today? And it sounds like you're just finding reasons to say, oh, I don't feel too good because, that hypochondria sort of almost, you get that look, like as if you're just picking up on the latest trend of illness. And it's not that. The one thing that really sort of got to me at one point, and I did get quite angry at the time, I remember, when my one of the medical professionals said that they'd measured every serious illness. And so basically their conclusion was it's a mental thing. It's all in your head. And I said, well, it may well be now, and I'm certainly more anxious about it, but it didn't start there.
Mm-hmm.
It started with something else. In my case, we believe now it was a virus, a physical trigger that then wouldn't go away. So I started to become more anxious about it. And then all the other layers become apparent, So, yeah, I understand, I think, probably more about my condition than my own GP, and probably quite a few other people in the medical profession, I would say. It's almost as if the body of sufferers now understand more than the medical profession.
Yeah, it's a frustrating thing, and it feels like a bit of a cop out sometimes. The whole, oh, you're just depressed, or it's all in your head, and sometimes it's just I don't even know how to explain it. I interviewed one woman who, the doctor said to her, you're fine. So what's really going on that you don't want to go to work? And just really insulting things like that. Or even my own doctor, when I was trying to get her to sign some paperwork so I could take a disability leave, and she was like incredulous. She's like, you're fine. How am I supposed to sign anything? And I think I can barely get out of bed most days. How is this fine? Despite what your tests are showing, like, does what I'm telling you mean nothing? And then it compounds things even worse, I think, because so many of us are finding that whole mind-body component, that our brain is playing a role, our nervous system is playing a role in our symptoms, in the very real physical symptoms that we're having. But then that triggers things of people telling us it's all in our mind. And it just feels reminiscent of that. And it's just, it's such a tricky situation for people navigating these conditions. It's so much in the gray, and there's so much, dismissal and gaslighting, and it's a complicated thing for people. It
is, and there was a Dr. John Sarno wrote a book that I read, and it was The Divided Mind, and he talks about the mind-body connection and how the mind, when the mind or the body, the mind perceives fear or stress or a situation where we need to fight or flight,
Mhm.
and we don't react to that. We don't listen to our body. Eventually, it will take action to make us feel unwell, to sort of, to make us rest or sort of take respond to this alarm that it's raising. So you're in this stressed state. You don't feel stressed physically, or let's say, you don't recognize the stress. You're not conscious of it. Your body is in a stressed state. Your body thinks there's something wrong, and you're not taking action. So the mind will create situations where you then have symptoms, and then you know, you're forced to take action.
Yeah, it's so fascinating to learn about all of this. And it's the biggest piece, I think, is just understanding that your brain and nervous system do create symptoms to
Yeah,
keep you safe. Like we think, oh, I'm feeling nauseous because of something I ate. That food made me feel nauseous. But no, your brain and nervous system you've flipped on that. They've dispatched that symptom for you so that you'll stop eating it and you won't eat it again. Or if you're too
yeah,
close to something hot, it'll give you a burning sensation, or touching something sharp, you'll get a pain sensation so that you'll stop doing that. Our brain is up there. It's like I picture a person up there with a control center, just like, fatigue on, fatigue off, pain on, nausea off, just trying to keep you alive. So the symptoms are real and they're there to protect us. Like our bodies don't give us suffering just for the sake of
no,
suffering. It's all an event to protect us and keep us alive. And
yeah,
sometimes it's protecting us from really strong emotions and things in our life that it feels are very threatening, and it needs to just like, no, we got to protect you from that. So yeah, it's a complex thing to understand.
mm, yeah, yeah. As we've all found out,
So,
extremely complex.
yeah. So where are you now with all of this? What's your status with your condition? How would you explain
Yeah,
that?
like I said earlier, I think I'm managing far better now, and it's only in the last 2 or 3 years that I've really been able to get on top of it. Through understanding, getting that sort of guidance in the first place, to then taking action. So with the Optimal Health Clinic, I learned to sort of relax my mind. I do a lot more now to sort of, just slow the information flow through the eye. I mean, 80% comes through our eyes. So if I'm looking at a screen 5 days a week, it's gonna be impacting. So I try to take more breaks. I'm actually now considering sort of reducing my working hours. I'm getting close to retirement anyway, so it makes sense. But yeah, I've had to carry on for various reasons, and that's not been easy to manage. But I've gone from there, from calming the mind. I do tapping meditation on a daily basis, only 15 minutes. It doesn't need to be any more, but just to bring my mind back into that safe space again. And the more we return, the more we create, healthy synapses and pathways in our mind. So eventually, I'm hoping my mind will stay in that parasympathetic nervous state, as opposed to the sympathetic nervous state of fight or flight. And adding to that, now I've been able to very luckily locate a local nutritionist who's dealt with and supported chronic fatigue sufferers. There aren't that many about, but I found one, and so I'm following it's not a strict diet; it's just a more healthy diet. I thought my diet was healthy. Clearly, it wasn't as healthy as it needed to be. Um, and again, supplementation, targeted supplementation. So taking, getting some more detailed examinations of your vitamin levels and your various sort of like markers, and that's helping to settle the metabolism. A lot of those symptoms are easing. They still surface if I don't take note of what I'm doing and avoid the triggers. And I'm now able to do a little bit more exercise. So whereas before I just wouldn't have contemplated it, I ate too much. I feel heady and lightheaded and nauseous. Now I'm doing a little bit of exercise, but I'm operating within the boundaries of my current levels. And you're probably heard the phrase of bouncing the boundaries. So you stay within that area for a time, and then you try just to see if you can bounce that boundary a little bit further. And over time, building that level of exercise along with the nutrition and the calming the mind should get me back to a far better place. But overall, I think I'm in a far better place now, even 2 years on, 2.5 years on from first understanding and putting into practice some of the measures.
Bouncing the boundaries. I love
Yeah.
that. I've never heard that term before. That's a really good way to explain it. Yeah, I'm gonna.
I've got to give that one to Alex Howard. That's one of his phrases.
Okay, yeah, it's a good one. Yeah, yeah, I like that a lot. So, I mean, you've spoke a little bit about this, but I just love to hear more from your experience, your perspective. How has your understanding of this condition, this diagnosis, changed from 10 years ago to now?
So up to 7 years ago, I didn't even know what it was. I'd never heard of it. And I actually have heard of it because people used to, I don't know, there's a famous comedian in the UK, Ricky Gervais, does the Golden Globes, and he's quite a satirical comedian. And he did a stand-up sketch at one point in 2007, let's say, it's come some time back now. And he was talking about people with ME. And he jokes and says, it's the lazy person's disease. I don't feel like it today, so I'm not going to work. And then he flips, having made fun of people in that condition. And I, like everybody else at that time, laughed and thought, yeah, that's really funny. And then he flips it and says, but this is a real condition. This is a physical. People think it's a mental condition. It's not. It's more than that. Actually, he was quite knowledgeable about it, which I thought was a great way to sort of bring it to the fore. But at that time, I was fine. It was 3 years later that I suddenly sort of realised what it was for sure. And since that time, as I mentioned, I've read more, learned more, and I think the more I know, the more I've read. I've started reading the book today, and straight away in that book, there's something new. There's something extra to take into account. And so my knowledge has grown. I feel in a position now where I can share my experience and perhaps give somebody else a little bit of a better steer, so they don't take 7 years to get to the same place. They can start with a bit of guidance working on that now. If they feel chronic fatigue and they get the diagnosis, that's their issue. But I think a lot of the things that we do in terms of recovery from chronic fatigue are good for general health anyway. So even if you're not got diagnosis, why not? Why not try it out? But yeah, so I want to share that. I want to share that experience, not the unpleasant bits, but sometimes you have to explain how bad it can get, but also the road to managing and hopefully recovery in the future.
And you have written a book through all of this. I know that is not a small thing to take on. So congratulations on that. I know it's on Amazon. So tell us about that. What prompted you to do that, and what is the book about?
Well, I started as a means to try and relax my mind. I always fancy doing a bit of writing. I'm not literally qualified, or I'm not very good in that respect. So the writing is very basic. It's very clumsy. But I started writing a bit of fiction because I wanted to get away from this real world, which was quite confusing and painful, and just move into a world where I could just be in control. And then I thought, well, I'd given a list and an account of my condition to so many medical professionals. So I was getting really tired of it. I started writing it down. And then I thought, well, why didn't I write this as a chronological sort of story, not with the intention ultimately of sharing it with other people, but actually it grew into that. And one thing, like I said at the very start of the interview, what inspired me when you wrote your story, and I thought that book really helped me. Maybe I could give somebody else a similar leg up, a similar lift. And so it's called On a Scale of 1 to 10 because so many of my encounters with medical professionals, they'd say, from a pain perspective, on a scale of 1 to 10, how's the pain today? Or on a scale of 1 to 10, how's this, how's that? And it became a theme, and I just, well, my scale 1 to 10 probably is very different to your scale 1 to 10, doctor, but I would say I'm on a 7 today. Oh, that's really bad. Well, actually, it's quite good because sometimes I'm at a 9 or a 10, Yeah. And so I wanted to sort of express this through writing. So it's very factual, and it really does, it accounts all the way through the 10 years to the point pretty much of where I am now, because it was published only a few months ago. As you say, it's on Amazon. And my other books are there. They're being reviewed at the minute, so they're not necessarily available. But what I've also done, and this is where I'm hoping really gets a bit of traction, my author site is J.M. Georgeson. That's my author name. Obviously, it's a pseudonym. So jmgeorgeson.co.uk, and I think the link will be available from the interview. But in there, for CFSME, my blog is really sort of stepping through what I see, or for me anyway, was the condition, triggers, evolution, where I ended up, and then how I'm gradually climbing out of it. And I'm hoping that that proves useful for somebody. And I'm happy to get people's input and steer, and because collectively, if we can share the knowledge that we have, then collectively we can help more people who end up in this prison chronically.
Absolutely. I think it's so incredible that you're doing everything that you're doing and just helping to get information out into the world and just helping people to feel less alone on these journeys. I mean, it's just so important and have hope. So, yeah, for people watching, if you just expand the video description, you'll find all the links and everything you need to know to find everything that Jeff was just talking about. So, I definitely encourage you to take a look and see what's there because he's got some really great stuff. Jeff. I really appreciate you. I'm so glad that you are making progress on your journey. And as you'd mentioned, you and I have been in contact for really quite some time, and have I feel like I've been a part of your journey for a while. So it's a nice moment for me to have you here and to help share a bit of your story with other people. So thank you so much for being here, for doing this. Yeah, I just really appreciate you and your time. Thank you.
Well, appreciate the opportunity, and to anyone out there who's watching, if this helps even one iota, I'll be a very happy man.
I have no doubt that it will. So, yeah, and for people watching, Jeff's mentioned Alex Howard from the Optimum Health Clinic a few times. So I did interview him on the channel. He's incredible. So I'll link that up here if you want to take a look. He's a wealth of knowledge and experience with treating these conditions. He's been doing it for a long time and has his own personal journey with this. So, yeah, a lot of really great stuff there. And as always, a quick shout out to one of our channel members, Sarah Lewis Muir. Thank you, Sarah, for joining and supporting the channel. I really appreciate you. I hope you're enjoying the extra perks that you get as a channel member. So yeah, that's it for today. If you're watching, if you have a story to tell, please use the link in the video description and get in touch with me and let me know because I'd love to hear from you. So yeah, thank you to those of you watching. Really looking forward to your comments and questions on this video. Let's keep the conversation going. Big hugs to you, whatever you're facing. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you got a ton out of it, and I hope to see you in this next one with Alex Howard.